you following development camp? What's the sense around the building here these days?
Yeah, I think people are really excited. This is kind of, Craig Berube has been around and present. And, the one thing that really stood out when we walked in is seeing a lot of the prospects wearing just a word that says work on their shirts. Like it was right away. That was like the emphasis, like nothing else, the Leaf logo replacing the O, and players just kind of really excited. And I think nothing represents that more than seeing Rhett Parsons and Hallocker get into that fight in a development camp. I've been to a lot of these now, and I haven't seen a fight like that. And it was pretty intense. It didn't get broken up right away. Like even when everyone kind of came in to kind of separate it, it took a little bit of a time before they can kind of loosen that. So everyone's pretty excited, pretty new, trying to kind of get to know everything there, but these are the days where, like, for some of those surefire prospects like Easton Cowan, take a little bit of a back seat. You've been around here before, but for some of the new guys, it's really a chance for us to kind of get to know these guys, especially in this year's draft class.
And looking forward to that over the next couple of years for sure. Easton Cowan not skating, but certainly a guy we think is going to be in training camp vying for a spot in this roster. Saying all that, what have you made of the first couple of days here, maybe of the offseason and free agency for the Maple Leafs?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the Leafs are doing the best they can with the situation that's presented in front of them. You lose Mitch Marner. They knew for a while they were going to lose him. They really couldn't do anything about it. And it's tough to kind of use that money and just look at the free agent draft class and kind of go pick them out. So I think what the Leafs recognize is for the first time in a while, they have cap space. And as it gets closer to the end of August, there's going to be teams that push up and build up against their limit that, oh, you know what, all of a sudden there might be a top 6 winger that comes loose for the Leafs because a team is just right up against the cap and needs to kind of pry that loose. So they've got a little under $5 million in cap space. It's really more if you kind of carry less than 23 guys. Like the calculation is based on a lot of depth guys that may or may not be there. So I like the Michelli gamble. It makes a lot of sense. There was a lot of buzz around him when he was kind of going for the Calder in that year and getting some votes there. And certainly there's an opportunity there for him if he can kind of rebound off his down year. But I do like that the Leafs have taken a patient approach and that they didn't just kind of throw the bag at someone that didn't really fit right away and then create another cap problem. So all in all, I think they've done a pretty good job just given the circumstances.
Yeah, and you mentioned, I think patience is probably a virtue right now with Tree Living in not rushing it and just enjoying the fact that you have this availability and wait for something that's right. And we talked about a top 6 forward. Does any names stand out to you on the potential to try to go after certain players that might become available, or even what type of player do you think they're looking for, as far as attributes and position?
I don't think there's any sort of specific automatic winger that they kind of have to go. I think what the Leafs would like to do is load up on their center depth. And if that player that they do bring in or whatever can kind of play both positions and they can move someone over, they're happy and satisfied with that. So I look at potential centers that are maybe available in a trade that makes a lot of sense for the Maple Leafs in that regard. Like, I see Jack Roslovic is out there. He's a guy who can kind of play the right wing, and maybe if the situation presents where he's still available kind of later and there's interest to kind of bring him on, he can kind of fit and be there, but he's not an automatic guy that would be a surefire superstar stud right winger. So I think it's just load up on guys that can kind of move up in there. Maybe they try the Max Domi experiment again with Matthews on his right side and figure out their center depth that way and see that, if that worked before when Marner was hurt 2 seasons ago, maybe they can kind of re-explore that situation and then kind of focus back to their center depth. I do think that in addition to just kind of finding someone there, the center depth I think the Leafs have realized as John Tavares gets older and some of the other positions that they could really use another potential 2C in that spot. And I think if they get that, and then it just so happens that they can move someone to the right wing spot that Mitch Marner used to occupy, and they can get offense in different ways, they'd be good with that.
And who knows? I mean, I think there's a level of impatience with the fan base and the media and everybody alike that they got to do something right now. I mean, who's to say down the road it isn't the trade deadline and that's when they exercise it? Like maybe a guy like Blake Coleman's available or a Nazem Kadri. I think the uniqueness of the market is what sets this year apart. Another name I was looking at was Victor Olofsson, but the trade route intrigues me because I think out of all teams in the league right now, there is one who is definitive, I think, in looking to try to get Gavin McKenna, and that's the Pittsburgh Penguins, and Kyle Dubas is there. And the name Bryan Rust-Ultz has been floated out there. 3 years left at 5.125, 71 games last year at 31 tucks. He could play with elite centers as he's proven throughout his career. He's 33. His no move just ended. Would he make sense for the Maple Leafs in your opinion?
I think he would. It would just be, if you have him in there, then where's the spot, right? Like it's probably second line instead of first line because you have William Nylander who plays on the right side as well. You can kind of move into that spot, but usually you want your other winger to kind of be that grittier guy who can help get him the puck. And so if you have Nyes, then Russ can be your guy on the second line in that regard, and then you kind of play around with some of the other wingers there. So I think it makes a lot of sense in terms of the way he plays. He perfectly fits the identity of what this Toronto Maple Leafs team wants to be and has improved on from last year going into this year. It's just going to be what's the package to get someone like him, right? Like, I don't know if necessarily getting a couple of depth forwards who don't have a lot of term or money committed like a Kampfer Yarncroke's going to do it. It might take something else. And then the other issue that you guys have discussed on the show as well, and we have on our side, is that the cupboard is bare in terms of assets that the Leafs have to kind of trade to kind of fill these holes. So, a lot of what the Leafs are doing now, in addition to the draft, is getting high-priced free agents that can kind of see high-priced college free agents, like in March, for example, where they can kind of come in and, like a Luke Hames, for example, they can kind of load up the cupboard that way and hope they can kind of build up big. But really, it's just going to be the assets to kind of fill that spot. But Bryan Rust, for sure, is someone who can kind of be an asset and plays the type of hockey that Craig Berube wants, for sure.
Yeah, David, also there's some guys that are up for extension, a handful of them with, in my mind, Anthony Stolar is leading the charge. Do you think that's something that the Leafs are interested in right now? And if so, what do you think that looks like specifically with Stolarz?
Yeah, I've heard this talked about a lot. I think there would definitely be interest there. I mean, I think what you saw in that Florida series when they missed him is his ability to play the puck and how the goaltender, in the way the Leafs are playing Florida so well, is able to kind of push the pace of play. It's not that Stolarz or Wall that there's a big difference in terms of the quality of goaltenders between the two, but certainly Stolar's confidence with the puck allowed the team in front of him to play very different. So I think there's interest there. The problem there is going to be he didn't play as many games as Wall. He's still had injury issues. So he's not taken the 50 plus games where you can kind of anoint him as a starter that can carry the load. Like, he's definitely starter capable, but he hasn't carried the load yet. And so that's going to be a bit of a concern, because if you go long term and you buy up years by giving a higher cap number and he doesn't persevere over some of the wear and tear and some of that other stuff, it gets tricky in terms of finding the right value. So it might be another one of those like 2 to 3 year type situations where a number kind of has to make sense. But maybe this kind of bleeds into the season because they just kind of have to figure out, okay, well, is he there for the long haul? And also, if you're Stolarz, look at how thin the goalie market was this year. And then you could perhaps cash in on free agency big time if you replicate what you did last year from a numbers perspective.
So I put out yesterday, the two sides haven't got underway in terms of negotiations. Obviously, the Maple Leafs have a lot of fish to fry over the next couple of days looking for that top 6-4. But I think the anticipation is there. And we talked about this also maybe like a month ago, how you just talked about the goalie market. There are a lot of comps to be had from the Stolarz camp, where you even look at guys like Blackwood. And I'm already ballparking like Carter Hutton coasts this show sometimes. We talked around maybe 5.5, 6 per season. Would you be comfortable
Yeah.
paying Stolars that amount?
I think it can work. I think it's really the term. That's what it's going to come down to. And I know that's like such a cop out answer because that's always an issue with goaltenders, but especially in this market when you've had two goaltenders who, Wall, I think, took a big step in the regular season in terms of being able to handle an increased workload. Anthony Stolarz did as well to a degree, but he got hurt. He was away for a long period of time and then came back and then was hurt again. Fairly or unfairly gets knocked in the head. I get it. Like goalies can't really kind of stop themselves from doing that. But I think you could do that on a short-term deal. On a long-term deal, that's where it kind of gets to a concern. But with the cap going up, the projections for 2 years, I think you could handle that kind of increase for sure.
Were you surprised they let go of Holmberg, walked away from him?
Yes, but yes and no. I mean, I get the concern. If you recall last year, a similar situation was going to happen with Timothy Liljegren. Like both sides did work and talk, but really the concern is the walkaway number in arbitration. That's really what it is. And because that number is 4.85 million, if that number, usually those cases get pro player, and if it got up to the threes or something, that's something the Leafs were not going to be happy with. So it was really just kind of finding a number and kind of fit. They certainly did like him, but the arbitrations are such that when teams are trying to construct their roster and what they have a lot of and what they don't have a lot of, they're concerned about that arbitration case. We've seen it so many times. Remember they walked away from Ondrej Kase a couple of years ago after he had like 20 plus goals, but it was because he only played like 55 games, had injury concerns, and the Leafs were just concerned about committing a lot of money to a player that may not be available. And that's not what they take into consideration in ARB cases. So I'm not surprised. I thought maybe there might be a path to a deal. Craig Berube certainly leaned on him a lot in the playoffs and was a player who at times could play in that top six on the wing there. And I know just talking to him, he prefers to be a center, and it doesn't look like that opportunity was available from Toronto. So I wasn't surprised to see that Tampa snapped him up.
Yeah, he's been a quiet guy in the media and all that, but I know talking to him a couple months ago, he does prefer the center ice position, and I'm very curious to see how he's deployed in the bottom six there. But yeah, I think it's so intriguing because he's a guy who finished the year maybe playing on the second line with Tavares and Nylander, and they just walk, and he gets like 1.55 a year. But just to wrap, I love doing this show for a multitude of reasons, among them giving other media members the platform they deserve. You and Masters caught a bit of a stray the other day from Banks_Leaf on Twitter, saying every time I see a comment about the tough Toronto media, I just think of Mark Masters and David Alter. The thought of either of those guys being your biggest oops is the funniest thing to me. How do you respond to that, Alter?
Unprovoked attack.
No, it wasn't attack. I think it was we actually DM'd after that. If you look at his reply underneath, he was actually very complimentary of me.
Yeah.
Like he actually said he would send me to like a hostage negotiation on his behalf, which I thought was pretty complimentary. But no, it's one of those things. The whole Mitch Marner thing, it's tough because you kind of see him go. And I in my career, I've never kind of written about like relationship with players and media, but like I remember when that's 23-24 season when he was taking a blackout from the media and he was kind of saying we don't care what you guys think and all that kind of stuff. I kind of decided to write about that experience because I thought it was important to kind of explain here that sometimes I think people can't discern the difference between media and social media, the people that are there and the people that are not. And so I was when I saw that initially, I read it that way, and then I saw his reply underneath and the other stuff. I was like, I actually appreciate you saying that. Like it was a nice thing. Not that message, but the one after. I think it was just misconstrued afterwards. But Masters is the GOAT. I always say that.
Yeah.
But just kind of being in there every day, we're grinding as well. I think it's important to be there. There's a level of accountability of being there every day and I think it's important for Leaf fans to know because, this industry kind of shrinks in terms of traditional media. So I love what you guys are doing every day. And I think it's important that people kind of are aware that we're there on a daily basis, so that we're giving a bit of a different perspective of kind of what it's like there.
Unfortunately, I give nobody on Twitter the benefit of the doubt. In my opinion, he probably backtracked, as there was some backlash to that tweet. But we'll leave it at that.
I only saw it later.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I'll just say that you're a big glue guy in terms of the media. I'm only there sometimes. But for example, Nikita Grabenkin, when he got called up, all of a sudden, like Alter's talking Russian to this guy and relaying the questions. That was unreal, dude.
That's handy.
Yeah.
That's the first time I ever flexed that was with Nikita Soshnikov back in 2016 when he came over, and then there was Kirill Semyonov as well. And my Russian is not great. Like, it used to be better when I was a kid, but I don't use it as much, and I'm trying to get it back. And when I would throw it out there, it'd be like, oh. And then I remember I saw Grabenkin. He knew he was getting ready for a scrum, so he was quickly eyeing me. He's like, "You're my guy, right?" I'm like, "Yeah." So don't worry. But yeah,
job.
it's
Love that.
Yeah, the Russian is it has come in handy at times. It was kind of sad from a personal standpoint to kind of see him go to Philly after all of that.
Yeah, no, that was wicked. I just remember that night vividly. And again, a lot of people don't see a lot of what happens behind the scenes. So appreciate you. Thank you so much for your time, and I'm sure we'll talk in the fall. Okay, bud?
Yeah, you got it. Thanks so much for having me on, guys.
Make sure to check out more of our content right here on the Leafs Nation YouTube page. We got long form interviews, we got clips, we got epic rants by Jay Rosehill. We simply have it all. And don't forget, you can find out much more at theleafsnation.com. Thanks so much for watching.